It is 9:30, and so we will call this meeting to order. And first, I'm going to take a roll call, just because we have I see people on the video, but a lot of call-ins. So, Lori Mizgorski, you here, Lori?
Present.
Yeah. Michelle Zemanek.
Present.
John Tagg. John, you got a loss for words already?
Never a loss for words, Jeff, but here.
Okay, Anna O'Rourke.
Here.
Jennifer Liptak.
Here.
Austin Davis. Austin, you there? I don't see his initials either. Okay, Jim Brewster. Okay. Jessica Walls-LaBelle.
I'm here.
Great. And Jerry DeLon. Jerry's not here. Stephanie Sterling. Okay, well, we're missing a few people, but I think we have a quorum. Some people are joining now. Okay, all right, well, with that, the first order of business is approval of the minutes of the April 23rd meeting. Michelle, can you make that motion?
Go back home though, yeah? Go back home.
Whoever's talking, please mute your
I'm gonna
phone.
meet in the basement right now. Let's start a conference.
Excuse me, NL, would you please mute your phone?
So move, Jeff, to approve minutes.
Jennifer, would you second that?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So I see Austin just joined. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the report of our Chief Executive, Ms. Kellerman. Can you take the podium?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I'd like to start off this morning with a moment of silence for the following retired employees who passed away in April. Operators Albert Clark and Russell Jumper, automotive mechanic Charles Jones, body repair person Joseph Olason, claims manager Jack Moore, building maintenance person Rupert King Sr., and operator dispatcher Marlene Thomas. I also want to start off today by offering our sincerest condolences, prayers, and hopes for moving forward to our transit family in San Jose, California. Many of us have seen the news that there was a shooting where an employee at Valley Transit, VTA, came to work and killed 8 of his co-workers. We're a tight industry. We know each other. Many of our rail personnel know folks who directly were impacted in this. It is a tragedy that I can't put into words. It's very heavy on our minds, and if we could have a moment of silence for them, I would appreciate that too. Thank you. Let me start off today by noting that we are not asking the board for approval on our proposed fare changes today. We are still completing our Title VI analysis. It will be finished before we present to the board next month. Just want to make sure we have everything wrapped up. And this should not impact our timeline, ideally, to be able to make these changes happen on the 1st of January going into 22. So even though we're not talking about fares, I do want to talk about finances as we shared them with our finance committee on operating capital budget this month. Suffice to say, the last 14 months have been very challenging for transit, definitely the craziest and most challenging of my career, and I think for everybody who works with us. Planning for uncertainty is really challenging, and it's a bromide, but you know, if we known a year ago we only had a year, we could have made different decisions. We don't know how long these impacts will be going on, and we don't know what the world looks like when this finally stabilizes. Transit anticipates it's going to be 4 to 5 years before ridership settles down. That doesn't necessarily mean returns, but that all of our markets settle where they're going to be and that we have our service out there. So the intent of our financial posture is to make sure that we can get through that 4 to 5 year window, keeping as many trips on the street as we can and adding service. The most important thing we can do is connect our communities. So though we don't really know what will happen next, we know that we think 4 to 5 years is when we can make some different decisions. And a lot of this we'll see over the summer. When will people start coming back to work into their offices if they've been working at home? How do travel patterns shift for folks who have been coming to work every day, but now they don't have to wear masks, or now they can go visit their family on the weekend, or now they can take advantage of all the great stuff that will be open this summer that wasn't open last summer and the fall? What does that look like? What does it look like when our universities come back in person and their staff show up? There's a lot that we're going to be watching the next couple of months so we can be responsive and have the best and most comprehensive network possible out there. So it is a challenge. It is something that, you know, these jokes, the best thing you can do is be flexible. That's where we are. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, we hope. COVID cases have significantly decreased. We're on track to the county being 70% fully vaccinated by June. People are opening back up for business. If you've been downtown, you've seen a lot more people, and people are starting to not wear their masks. They don't have to if they've been fully vaccinated. We are, of course, still covered under Transportation Safety Administration guidelines, where we have masks on our vehicles if you're waiting for a vehicle or any location served by transit. But when you're not on that bus and not waiting for that train, you don't have to wear your mask. Our ridership is starting to come back as well. Weekday and Saturday ridership were up 8% in April over March, and if it hadn't been for Easter, the Sunday levels would have been about 8% up as well. Overall, ridership remains at about 35 to 40% pre-pandemic levels. We do expect to see more people coming back. On Memorial Day, we will begin modifying our capacity constraints up. On June 21st, we remove all of our capacity constraints, so anyone who wants to ride transit can. We look forward to seeing more of our friends coming back to service. And through all of this, Port Authority and the transit industry as a whole have benefited from 3 rounds of federal funding to offset the cost of COVID. Now, these are big numbers. The CARES Act funding passed on March 27th of last year was over $140 million. Big number. Between the overtime we spent on sanitation, the amount of money we spent on quarantining and testing, the amount of money that we put into PPE, if we had only received this iteration of funding, we would have started reducing service in March and April this year, and Port Authority would have closed by the end of the summer. We simply could not have survived. The second iteration of funding, the CARES funding, gets us about another year down the road, and the American Rescue Plan gets us even further. If 75% of our ridership returns, this funding can help us get through 2026. If 50% returns, we'll be making some pretty harsh decisions in 2024 and 2025. But again, this funding is to be concentrated to make sure we can keep our service up and running, and that's where we're going to invest it. So where does it leave us? We will continue to push forward to continue to drive the progress we started pre-pandemic, but we'll do so with fiscal caution to ensure that we can stretch this vital funding as far as we can go and that we can protect service in our community. For folks who've moved to new neighborhoods, they need that service to be there. For folks contemplating a new job, they need to know that that bus route will be able to get them home, or their train will run late enough to get them home or to take them to wherever they need to go. We're part and parcel of this recovery. Meanwhile, I want to know we're also working with our partners to look at funding succession to Act 89, which carves out most of our capital funding coming from the state. And this is another vital step in our future for stabilizing and looking at finances to grow into the future. And we're going to grow. Our next transit plan outlines where we can be in 2045 here in Allegheny County. We're in our next to last stage. So people can go online to Next Transit 1T, nexttransit.network, and see, did we hear you? Did we get the right corridors? Are we looking at the right capacity? It is big and bold and visionary. Allegheny County deserves big and bold and visionary. So we know that as we stabilize, we have a bright future to focus on, and we will continue to invest our dollars to make sure we get there. Mr. Chair, if there's no questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Kathleen. Are there any questions? Okay. Let me just note too that Stephanie Sturman is on the call. She was missed in the roll call. So Diane, when you do the minutes, Stephanie's on. And also, I forgot to remind everybody this is being recorded. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the report of the Performance and Oversight Committee from our Chair, Michelle Zemanek.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. The Performance Oversight Committee met virtually last week, and I have 5 resolutions for your consideration this morning. The committees first reviewed 7 procurement items and determined the bids to be in accordance with the authority's procurement policies and procedures. The price is fair and reasonable, and the bidders to be responsible and the bids responsive. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends the award of bids listed in the resolution for the total amount of approximately $3.1 million. My fellow board members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
Ann, could you make that motion?
So moved.
John, could you second it?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
The next resolution seeks authorization to establish the fifth-year budget with TransDev Services Incorporated. In April 2017, the authority's board authorized the award of a 5-year agreement with TransDev Services Incorporated to provide professional services to coordinate and administer paratransit services for individuals with disabilities and elderly persons in Allegheny County, also known as Access. The agreement specifies that a not-to-exceed amount for the agreement will be established for each fiscal year. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends a not-to-exceed amount for the agreement's 5th fiscal year, covering the period July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, in the total amount of $2,710,000. It was noted at the meeting that the proposed amount represents a 0.3% decrease when compared to the cost approved by the previous fiscal year. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
Austin, can you make that motion?
So moved.
Lori, can you second it?
Second.
Any discussion?
Jeff, it's John. Just one comment. Access has done an outstanding job during this pandemic, so I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you, John. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
The next resolution seeks authorization to enter into a permanent easement agreement for the Mount Washington Tunnel Hillside Stabilization Project. Over the past several years, the hillside on the southern portal of the Mount Washington Tunnel experienced various flooding and mudslide issues. It was noted at the meeting that this is a critical connection for the authority's buses and light rail vehicles between Station Square Transit Station and South Hills Junction Transit Station. The authority has developed a plan to establish the hillside, to stabilize the hillside. But to complete the project, the authority requires permanent access to and the use of a portion of the property adjacent to the tunnel owned by 288 Paul Street, LLC. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends entering into a permanent easement agreement with a property owner to complete the project and maintain improvements post-completion. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
Stephanie, would you make that motion? Stephanie? She told me she was there. Okay, Jessica, can you make that motion?
So moved.
Okay, and then Jen, would you second it?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
The next resolution seeks authorization to award a construction contract for the Mccandless Park and Ride Site Improvements Project. The work includes demolition and construction of a paved bus layover and customer parking areas, ADA upgrades, underground stormwater and management systems, site amenities and improvements, LED light upgrades, installation of an operator relief facility, bus shelters, and landscaping. It was also noted at the meeting that this resolution would further authorize the authority to enter into any necessary agreements with the Township of Mccandless to maintain the adjacent sidewalk and the newly installed stormwater retention system. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends awarding the contract to the lowest responsible bidder, Murrin Incorporated, in the amount of $3,320,341, subject to completion of the pre-award requirements. My fellow board members, I request that you approve this resolution.
Ann, can you make that motion?
So moved.
John, would you second it?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
The final resolution seeks authorization to award 4 construction contracts for East Liberty Manchester Equipment Improvements Project. After bids were received, it has been determined that the lowest responsive bids from responsible bidders meeting the authority specifications for the project are as follows. Mercedes Construction Company in the amount of $900,630 for the general construction contract. Lugalia Mechanical Incorporated in the amount of $200,223. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. $2,223,000 for the mechanical construction contract. First American Industries Incorporated in the amount of $312,000 for the plumbing construction contract, and Westmoreland Electrical Services LLC for $493,600 for the electrical construction contract. The Performance Oversight Committee recommends awarding the contracts to the above stated contractor subject to completion and the pre-owned requirements. My fellow board members, I respectfully request that the board approve this resolution.
Lori, could you make that motion?
So moved.
Austin, would you second that?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you,
Mr. Chair,
Michelle. Anything
That
else?
concludes. No,
Okay.
that concludes everything. Thank you.
John, do you have a report?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow board members. The Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee met last week. I have several updates for the board. First, a major service change is scheduled for June 20th, 2021. Bus Route 69 Trafford is being shortened on its inner end to the Wilkinsburg Station. This is significant for the communities of Pitcairn, Wilmerding, Turtle Creek, and Forest Hills because it removes their direct access to downtown Pittsburgh. Port Authority is no longer allowed to use the existing layover location in Trafford, and we are working to identify an alternate location in Trafford. The Bus 4 route, Troy Hill, we are adding new Sunday service to the route in concert with last year's update to the service standards, which call for local bus routes to have service 7 days a week. The second is minor service changes scheduled for June 20, 2021. Several downtown bus routes have been moved to accommodate continued outdoor dining along portions of Penn Avenue. Many of these changes have already been in place as temporary detours. The P2 bus route will begin a pilot project and will only go inbound as far as Penn Station along the East Busway. It will no longer use bus stops in Liberty Avenue, Smithfield Street, and Grant Street in downtown. This is being done as a pilot to test operational changes and rider responses to apply to the P1 bus route, which consistently experiences overcrowding. The bus route 81 and 83 will permanently shift from Bigelow Boulevard to Belfield Avenue. This is being done in coordination with the University of Pittsburgh's Bigelow project. There are a few other minor changes such as schedule tweaks and trip additions in some routes. The third item, update the process of service request. The Planning and Service Development Department will not issue evaluations for a new major service request in its FY 2021 annual service report. Staff are focusing solely on changes to ridership and schedules as a result of the pandemic and post-pandemic environment. Number 4, the Planning Division projects. Staff held public meetings for the South Hills Station area plan on May 10th and for the long range plan Next Transit on May 24th and 25th. Fifth, launching a new bus stop geodata tool presented by Ellie Newman. Ellie presented a tool, presented a tool in development by staff that will allow for an easier way to explore stop level ridership for multiple stops at a time using an online map, which will can draw a circle around the bus stop of interest. The tool will significantly staff time, will save significant staff time, allow the public to more easily understand rider patterns without having to submit a formal request. In the future, we hope to add light rail station ridership and trip counts by route for stops. The tool, when launched, will be added to the authority's open data webpage. The sixth item I'd like to report on is the Committee for Accessible Transportation met on May 6th from 5:30 to 7:30 for their regular scheduled staff provided updates on the status of the Velasco Station in Beachview, the Title VI analysis for November 2022, a bus stop accessibility survey preview, and a funding update along with a liaison update containing items of interest to the committee. The next quarterly meeting is scheduled for August 5th, 2021, and will be conducted using Microsoft Teams. The last item is the Allegheny County Transit Council met virtually on May 26th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. They were provided an overview of the June service changes and the finance and budget overview, along with a liaison update containing items of interest to the council. The council's next meeting is scheduled for June 23rd, 2021. More information about upcoming meetings can be found on the Port Authority website. If there are no further questions, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions? Okay, from that, we'll move on to the report of the Finance Committee from our Chair, Ann O'Rourke.
Good morning, Chair and fellow board members. The Finance Committee met on Thursday, May 20th. CEO Catherine Kellerman gave an update on the fair policy change process. She reported that the public hearings are complete and the Title VI report is being finalized. A resolution to adopt the proposed changes will be presented at the June board meeting. CEO Catherine Kellerman and CFO Peter Shank presented the preliminary FY 2022 operating and capital budgets. Ms. Kellerman presented the preliminary FY 2022 operating budget. She stressed that the transit industry continues to experience significant ridership loss and overall uncertainty on future ridership levels. She went on to emphasize that the authority will continue to focus on maintaining current service levels while taking great care of both employee and rider safety. Ms. Kellerman also stated that the authority will be transitioning from a COVID-19 focus to instead refocusing on pre-pandemic organizational initiatives. Mr. Shank reported that the preliminary FY 2022 operating budget would set revenues at pre-pandemic levels to simplify invoicing of federal stimulus funding. The preliminary operating budget is set at $494,238,449, which is an increase of $8.57 million or 1.76% over the FY 2021 budget. Mr. Shank also reported on the preliminary FY 22 and 2022 capital budget. The preliminary capital budget totals $227.8 million, with $18.6 million for debt service, $147.5 million for fixed guideway improvements, $54.9 million for facility improvements, and $6.7 million for support programs. Mr. Shank then presented a resolution for authorization of Port Authority staff to file grants and submit invoices and status reports with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. PennDOT requires the authority to identify and the board of directors to approve positions that will have access to PennDOT's electronic system, DOT grants. The identified positions are included in Exhibit A. My fellow members, I respectfully request the board approve this resolution.
Jessica, can you make that motion?
So moved.
Stephanie, since I see you back on, you want a second?
Sure, second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries.
Thank you. Chief Financial Officer Peter Shank then reported on the April 2021 financial statements. He reported that total operating income for the month of April was $5.1 million under budget. Through April, total operating income is $54.8 million below budget. Every operating income category was below budget for the month and on a fiscal year-to-date perspective due to the pandemic. Lower passenger revenues and access program service revenues constitute most of this shortfall due to this pandemic. Total expenses for the month of April were $963,802 under budget due to lower fringe benefit expense and despite a $2.8 million charge for retroactive wage payment related to the A2U Local 85 contract. The authority's total expenses are $35.6 million under budget for the fiscal year. Mr. Shank reported that if these trends continue, the authority will not have to use any deferred revenues for operating expenses or purposes. Total subsidy for the fiscal year is $5.87 million above budget due to CARES Act receipts that have offset lower passenger revenue. Mr. Shank reported that the authority ended April with approximately $143.4 million in operating reserves. Mr. Chairman, unless there are any other questions or comments, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions from the board? Okay, thank you, Ann. With that, we'll move on to the report of the Technology Committee from the Chair, Jen Leptak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Technology Committee met on Thursday, May 20th. We had one item before us. The procurement bid as presented to the committee is for the purchase of equipment installation and configurations assistance as necessary of 95 Cisco 9300 series Catalyst switches using a competitive bid contract on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of General Services under networking equipment and related services. E-Plus Technology Incorporated has been awarded the contract, and the authority wishes to make purchases under the terms and conditions of this contract number 4400020304 in the amount of $897,408.82. The committee found that this proposal to be in accordance with the authority's procurement policies and procedures and a Commonwealth bid and contract appropriate for a cooperative purchase. The price were found to be fair and reasonable, and the bidder responsible and responsive. So, my fellow board members, I request approval for this resolution. Please.
Thank you. Austin, can I have that motion?
So moved. So moved.
Michelle, would you mind seconding it?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, with that, we'll move into any new business. Anybody on the board with any new business to discuss? Okay, we have one public comment from Nick Callahan. So we'll accept that comment now. The reminder that there is a 3-minute time limit on public speaking. Is Nick Callahan going to be speaking? Okay, well, in that case, the next meeting is going to be June 25th, and I hope we'll see you in person. And everybody have a great Memorial Day weekend, and we'll see you next month. Great.
You too, Jeff. Bye, guys.